this one. I've also brought in some guests. There's April, Andrea, and Amy from CalCap Properties. They are our property management company on this particular opportunity, and they're really, I think, the baseline for helping us get through the due diligence process. So I'll be calling on them from time to time on this, and it'll break up me talking, which is not as interesting as them talking. So I think we'll dive right in. So, you know, many of you know my story, but if you've been out there and you've been putting a ton of offers out, holy crap, what happens when it actually gets accepted, right? What do you do now? And sometimes, and I found early on in career is I spent a lot of time just trying to put offers out, but I didn't know like what would I actually have to do once somebody said yes, right? So the first thing you do is you check your math, like, did I screw up? And you know, did I just overbid something, right? So once you kind of get over that, hopefully you figure out that, you know what, I have a team behind me, and I've spent time building this team prior to that, and everything's going to be just fine. And so I know I've talked to a handful of folks just kind of starting out, and again, they're just focused on underwriting. But you know, I connected with Amy via another meetup back in March of last year, well before I ever had a deal, right? And I had interviewed probably about 6 or 7 other property management companies in Phoenix, in Texas, and New Mexico. And I really connected with them. And even though I didn't have a deal to take, say, hey, this is what we need, it was more of, let's get to know each other. Let's find some alignment with what we're trying to achieve. And so I shared our goals, and we found some alignment. And so when I called on them for help, it wasn't this first time introduction of like, hey, I have a deal, we're closing, can you guys come out and help us? I think because of that time we spent to get to know each other and understand and align, it really helped with the process. And so I think if you guys have a takeaway, that's one really good takeaway. So I'm going to share this, and I'll pause here for a minute, but there's a lot of folks that you should have on your team. And if you haven't thought about building your team yet, you better do it if this is the space you're in, right? So, you know, today it's all about, I'm going to highlight the property management, but there's a lot of folks that are involved on your team. One on the GP side, but also really your external team is critical, and not just in due diligence, but early on during the process and post-closing, you're going to need a lot of folks to get this done. And so it's just a little bit of a mindset to think about before really diving in. Any input? Amy, did I miss anything? Andrea, April, just chime in on kind of a teamwork
No,
piece.
I think you got it. And to Mike's point, the relationship prior to was very important. We get a lot of last minute, hey, can you check this out? The LOI is due tomorrow or this afternoon. And, you know, having that relationship ahead of time, knowing what the bandwidth of that group is, and having them know your buy box. I think it helps vet deals out, understand, you know, again, hey, I'm looking at 4 deals. You might talk to your property manager and they'll whittle that down to 1 deal easily, because they'll know, okay, yeah, you don't even want to be in that area of town for what you're looking to do. So, you know, it takes a little bit of time for the relationship to blossom, we'll say.
That's a good point. And I actually had another syndicator that's working on a deal in the Southeast, and it's like a 65 unit deal. And he's like, hey, do you know any property managers that are in this part of, I think it was Mississippi? And I'm like, yeah, I think, let me call somebody. I'm like, well, how far are you in the process? He's like, well, our DD starts next week. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy, because it's sometimes just thought of as an afterthought, right? That, hey, I got the deal in a contract. I'm going to have my team. I'm going to manage the business plan. Well, what you forget is the right arm, right? You can't do anything unless you have the right folks on the ground to help you actually execute. Because unless you're going to be on site, working with tenants, fixing toilets, it's a different game. So just that alignment is important. And what Amy just said about finding deals or maybe finding properties that don't fit. Just today, literally, I called Andrea. There was an opportunity for an off-market deal in Albuquerque that I said, hey, I got 2 things, these 2 properties. What does your team know? They have boots on the ground there. What do you guys know? And it wasn't just a no, it was like a hell no. You should stay away from this area. And so I appreciate that candor, right? Because we can go ahead and try to buy it and figure it out. But again, I'm going to lean on them to execute. And if they're telling me no, then I better be wise and listen and say that's not a good fit. So leverage your team. All right, so this is kind of the couple next slides is just the meat of everything. And really, we had the clock starts, right? So you do the LOI, you get past the LOI. Usually it takes a week between LOI and PSA, depending on your attorney, how fast they work. But once that PSA is signed, ideally you should be communicating with what are we going to do beforehand? What should we be doing right now versus when we actually get on site? So a lot of times there's the physical DD, but you can do a lot of due diligence well ahead of time. So I just talked about a couple of things. We kind of harped on this a little bit. Is we've underwritten it. We underwrote this one quite a bit. We had a budget, but we shared that with the group because again, I can come up with any fantastic plan, but if I'm going to lean on the team to execute, and they're going to say, "Whoa, that's a little bit light here, or it's a little heavy here. Let's massage this to make it work." That's a critical piece. Working with your lenders, right? That you may not have the application set, but you should at least have an idea, because if you don't have a good idea of your quote, how did you underwrite it? Check taxes. This was a little point of contention with this deal is in New Mexico, a broker is required to provide a assessed value or taxes based on the new assessed value, which is the purchase price. And so that was part of the DD files that he sent. However, New Mexico is a non-disclosure state. And so you don't want the city to know. What's that? Oh, sorry. I thought I heard somebody ask a question. Anyway, it bumped up taxes like 10 grand. And so fortunately, that's not the case. Now, it's the worst case scenario. So that's the broker doing his job.
What's that?
Hey, whoever's talking, you guys want to mute. So that was that piece, is make sure you get that. Same thing with insurance. And then check your contracts. This particular deal didn't have much. There's laundry, and there is, that's really it. There's no other contracts on site. So let's see here. Rent comp study. So I did my own, we did our own, our team did, but we also leaned on Ryan with CalCap to help us go through the comps and say, hey, let's just make sure all the data points are there. We had a CoStar report, I had a neighborhood scout report, I had a CalCap report, and then I had the Mike Angelo pick up the phone and call every apartment complex in the area in that report, right? Because I just needed to make sure that we're not overestimating our rent gain or rent potential, right? That's a huge piece that sometimes gets overlooked. The lease expirations versus projections, I just kind of talked about that. Lease audits. This is something that I am terrible at, and I don't love reading contracts and going through the rent roll, and we had an awesome team. That's exactly what was done. Fortunately, we got to do that before we even got on site. So we just connected with the property management place that's in place and was able to send us all the leases. And so April and Andrea kind of sat in Phoenix or San Antonio. I think they were all over the place, right? And we're able to go through the leases and upload that data. So that was a very helpful thing. So we knew kind of going in before we even got on site what the occupancy actually looked like, what the delta was between rent roll and actual leases. And if there was an issue, what do we want to do about it? April, anything funky that stood out to you that you think would be good to share?
No, we were able to get access to all of the files because the prior management company was gracious enough to upload it, so we didn't have to go through paper files or physical files. Some of the files were corrupted, but we were able to, because we had already established that relationship, we were able to get those files just resent over. So we did have access to all of the files, and all of the information was there and accounted for.
Awesome. Yeah, using technology. So there was another deal that we had looked at. There was all paper files, and so there was stacks of paper contracts. And again, I wasn't part of that, but I appreciated everything that they did. Let me see here. I got a few people that were having a hard time logging into this. I'm not sure why.
So the other thing that I want to add to that is the great thing on this physical due diligence that we just completed is that not only, with times changing and COVID, but, we're in the 2021 now, a lot of people are streaming more to that digital or e-sign or DocuSign situation. As we are transitioning out complexes, we like to go digital. So having the broker that was willing to have his staff scan and upload us the documents or pull them out of their database allows us to initially import that into a database upon onboard.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, I mean, he could have been a little more difficult and maybe not do that work. We would have just had to be there on site, but that was really helpful. Let me see here. The other piece is bank deposits. So just making sure you have what is actually going into the bank versus what's coming out of the P&L or the cash flow statement. Just a little bit of alignment. And so that's just always a good check. There might be a little bit of variance, but you're looking for things that are standing out. And then before you get in, as you're underwriting, the business plan is so critical. What is your plan? How long are you going to hold this thing for? I think a lot of folks want to get in, but they don't think about the exit. So, in this particular case, we're looking at about a 7-year hold. And so we're only going to do so many things between now and then. We need to align our debt to that kind of 7-year window, our renovations around that window. And so that helps us think about what are we going to do when we exit. Capital required, I think also hard to understand or hard to figure out sometimes of how much am I going to be required. This can all be done ahead of time for the majority of the piece, right? If you know that the roofs are 40 years old, you're probably going to need a new roof, right? Just for your lender to give you a thumbs up. They're going to say, hey, what's your plan for that? We were fortunate on this deal. Roofs were about 4 years old, not too bad. New swamp coolers. We did run into a couple things that they didn't probably seal a couple of the issues or a couple of the stacks. And then New Mexico gets cold. So some of the pipes that feed the swamp coolers froze and broke. And so those all have to be replaced. The good news is the owner's taking care of that. By the way, Andrea, the owner is taking care of that because they're going to have to turn it on before we close. So that's a good thing for us. We don't have to deal with that expense, and there'll be brand new pipes, or at least all repaired before we go live. So that's a good thing. And again, always back and forth, right? Like if you can get info from the property manager and broker on what other things could go wrong, even if you just did a drive-by, sometimes it's really easy to see. We toured this property back in September and we knew the parking lot was a disaster. So we're gonna have to patch and reseal, right? I can ballpark that. I can call a few people and just give them square footage and go, okay, I need to put away $30,000, $40,000 just for resealing. Let me just make sure that's part of our numbers as we underwrite. Because you'll get to a point you say, well, if I double my CapEx because I totally missed something, your deal, something that's maybe doing a double-digit cash on cash can go away real fast, right? You get down to single-digit cash on cash, and so now you have an investor issue because you may not have enough investors attracted to a lower return. So just some things to think about. Questions, comments, complaints on that kind of last slide?
I want to add something that probably you don't want to share, but I want you to share, Mike, is you sitting in the parking lot in the car in the evenings and nighttime before the physical inspection, making sure that it matches your neighborhood scout and the CoStar study reports. Do you want to talk about that?
That's good. Yeah, I'm not afraid to talk about that. That's awesome. So Michael, my partner, and I, we drove the property at night, right? We spent 3 days in Las Cruces, and that was the whole goal. You can go during the day and it's a beautiful location and all that good stuff. What happens at night, right? One of our concerns was that the property wasn't lit properly. We were pleasantly surprised. Most of the property is actually fairly well lit, but there's some areas of opportunity, kind of the laundry room, the area that backs to the mountains. And is there any suspicious dicey behavior, right? And we hung out there, we just waited, drove around, and we're happy, right? We did that 2 times, and that was a positive. So that's always a good thing to do. In contrast, a different property we looked at late last year wasn't as calm and didn't put me at ease, right? I probably should have carried my gun with me because it was definitely a little dicier and poorly lit, not the best neighborhood. And so it just gives you, again, that peace of mind, right? As part of diligence is knowing, these tenants, you're buying a property not just to protect your investors, but you also want to make sure your tenants are safe. And if there's an opportunity to fix that, you can do that. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That's good. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I call it Michael and Michael's property camping report.
That's right. That's right. We're working on a radio show, Mike and Mike. All right.
Hey,
Let's see.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, real quick, can you touch on the debt that you guys used on this property and how that aligned with your exit and your business plan?
Yeah. I wasn't totally going to get into that part, but happy to share a little bit. We're looking at a Freddie Mac 7-year term. It's got a couple years of IO. We're right in the middle of the application process right now, so I don't have all of the pieces figured out, but that's how we underwrote it. We looked at a few different options. What was Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Freddie was a little more friendly on the IO period and also the reserve requirement and the coverage ratio. So that's where we are right now. And that ties pretty well to our exit. We're going to likely do like a step down on the prepayment, just so that we're actually looking at yield maintenance. So it just depends on where we think interest rates could go by year 7. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but we can always talk offline too if you'd like. All right, so let's go to, so this is the other piece, right? So now we've gone around, and how do you do it? So it's just like Amy was saying earlier, it's the day LOI is due and possibly PSA next week. Get at least 2 weeks notice, at least, right? You got to travel there. If it's in your backyard, it's another story, but we had to travel there. We had an issue we had our flights booked, but that was the week that Houston and all of Texas froze over. And so all the flights got canceled. And so we had to figure out what are we going to do? And so we just jumped in the truck, and April was trusting enough of us to jump in the car with me and Michael and drive to Las Cruces for 5 hours. But she came back in one piece, I think. So it worked out okay.
You just knew that Andrea and I would come after you if anything happened to her. So
That's right. So she was safe. It was all good. But we pivoted, right? And again, it goes back to planning. You got to have a plan, and sometimes you have to have a backup plan when plan A fails. But I'm going to bring up this report. So who's going to participate? There's different breakdown of responsibilities, and I think I'll say Michael and I probably did the least. But what we really counted on was the team coming in to do the due diligence piece, which is walking in every unit, taking pictures. And I'll tell you, like, I'm so impressed with the software that they used. I was supposed to bring this up earlier, and I didn't. Let me show you something real quick. Hopefully you guys can still see my screen. So the software, and you guys can speak to it a little bit better than I can, but I'm going to bring this is at least on it here. So every unit, they go in, they take a picture of the front door. So they have this whole checklist, and it's all on their phone. So they'll type in the unit number, and they'll just go through, and it'll give you, this is kind of the summary, but it'll give you literally every area that could be of concern and what's the condition that it's in. So I'm going to get to the pictures because that's a lot more interesting than just looking at this stuff. So hopefully you guys can see that. There we go. Again, unit condition, pictures of the floors. The fortunate for us is all these units are classic. So really there's an opportunity to make some light improvements and increase the rents. But from a condition of care, we thought that the tenants actually took pretty good care of the property, and it's built in 82, so these boxes are pretty solid. But you can see the amount of data that the team collected. Electrical panels, got some issues with maybe the flooring type or the drywall damage. Sometimes some of the ceilings do have some leaks, so it's actually a really good point of conversation because I couldn't remember which unit had it, so I just pulled up. I knew all the roof units the third story units are all C. It's ABC, so it's 3 stories ABC. And so I went to the 3rd floor and I said, hey, we have some roof leaks, and this is the reason we're asking for some help with sealing those vent stacks that I mentioned previously, right? So without having the data, without going into every unit, I can quickly pull this up and go, hey, here's what we got, right? And then later on, we can go, hey, what was that one unit that had that whatever issue? It's pretty easy to figure out. So lots of pictures. This is an app that, am I incorrect on this? So as soon as you guys upload it, it's on your guys' server, right? So anyone else on your team could look at it and go, hey, 101A's got whatever issues. Is that accurate?
Yes. So usually, because like I was in Las Cruces with you all. So Andrea and also Jeff from our finance department, they were looking in on the progress that we were making. So they could say like, oh, I see you guys, they could say something as simple as, oh, the picture for the electrical panel was a little blurry. Can you hop back into that unit and retake that picture so we have a good visual of it? So yes, they can see all of the progress once it uploads from the cloud.
Awesome. And then there's a summary report, which I think looks like this one. There we go. So this is awesome, guys. This tells me right away, like if I need to figure out, so they looked at 123 angle stops. And if you don't know what an angle stop is, it's the thing that turns your water on and off underneath your sink or your toilet. So we need to repair one, right? How many blinds do we need to fix? We have some cabinet issues that need to be replaced. So I can take this, and their team can also provide me with a number, right? Say, hey, this is a ballpark repair for each one of these items, or I can go shop it. And this will help me get some scale. So if I need to go buy 15 refrigerators versus buying one, I know that in this case, I need to probably buy one because it tells me. So the amount of data that you collect is incredible, right? And you can see here GFCI. So we have a GFCI issue, challenge, whatever you want to say. We got to put some GFCIs in. So that's an electrical component, right by the kitchen sink and in the bathroom. Okay, cool. Nothing shocking or surprising, but it's data, right? And I'm a data nerd for those of you that know me. But thermostats, again, some issues we can work on replacing. So I'll just say again, it goes back to that partnership and having a team that knows what they're doing. This is what CalCap does, and so makes it easy for us. We don't have as owners to just go, hey, could you provide me this information? Could you get me this information? I can pull it, and then we can make a decision. And that could make or break the deal, or it could just be a pivot and go, okay, we just need to raise more capital. Or once we're in the deal, we just know this is what we have to do, right? Whether it's tomorrow or 6 months from now, we have that information. The other thing that was great is Rod, who leads their construction group, coordinated and brought all the contractors on site. So while I have some connections in that market, you might be in a market where you don't know anybody. I didn't have to think about it. He called the plumber, the roofer, the electrician, and a general contractor to help us with, all the large miscellaneous stuff. And so they walked with us, and there were some times that we weren't there. So Rod understood what we needed. We explained, obviously, the things that are structurally required, but there's some aesthetic things that we wanted to fix. And so we were able to communicate that back and get those quotes in. We just got most of those quotes in this week, so we're good to go. And it was a really awesome, again, coordination on that. What else? Understand the dynamic. Every current PM is in a different position. We were fortunate with this one that they knew that the property was being sold and that they were no longer going to manage it. That was part of their exit plan too. That's not always the case. Sometimes you take over or you're looking at doing DD and the existing property management company is also fighting for a seat or fighting to stay on property. So that could create a little bit of friction sometimes. But I'll say I had experience with CalCap in a different property and all very professional. And most folks want to be professional, right? You don't always get the cooperation from the other side. So that's just something that you should be aware of, that you could have a dynamic with, the amount of information provided or the quality of information provided. I'll say that in the nicest way.
Mike, question.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you are reaching out to the existing PM to get the information, is this something that you are doing it, or was CalCap helping you to get the information and get the data?
Both.
Both.
Yeah. So on the last deal, we worked directly with the regional head, so Andrea's counterpart at the other company, and just trying to coordinate through. We worked sometimes through the seller to get some of the information. Eventually, we kind of realized that that dynamic was better served to go through the seller, because obviously the seller was very motivated to provide us the information as much as possible. But early on, it was just direct between the two parties, and I would interject as needed, but try to get things set up so that it was ready to go and they can kind of handle all the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, I would add to that, and Andrea probably knows even more than I do, but I think every transaction is a little different. couple that I've been a part of, the broker is very hands-on and helping a lot of those communications start. But we're very used to disposition. We're as used to disposition as we are acquisition. So it's something that we really know how to work through. Yeah, sometimes the broker will help too, depending on, again, if it's an on-market deal, they're very, they want the deal to go. So they're very helpful most of the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The next point is COVID. COVID put some challenges in place. This particular deal, really, it was at 55, 56 units, I think we were able to walk. Two, we didn't have a key, and the other three, I think, had COVID, and so we couldn't get in, but pretty good success rate in my opinion. But that's something to be aware of. Hopefully this will dissipate and maybe go away completely, but we just something to be mindful of. If you're doing DD and you're in the middle of this hotbed, you might not be able to get into all the units. And if you can't get into all the units, do you really know what's going on? And that could affect your buying decision, right? We got a little creative on the last one. Is we had residents take pictures of their place and send that and upload it. It was a little bit of a hot mess, but it was an idea to try to think about how to pivot, right? Let's see. I think that's all I got on that.
Hey, Mike, I just want to add something really quick.
Yeah.
So, zooming outside of this deal, just for people who are syndicating for the first time, I will say that the service that the property management company provides in terms of due diligence is criminally underrated. One of our former business partners, Rob Roswell, he wrote a book and he has this quote that says, "You can't eat an elephant in a day." And it's one of my favorite quotes of all time. It basically just means you don't know what you don't know. And for people who are just don't know, if you're a first-time syndicator and you're buying a deal and you don't have the property management company doing the due diligence with experience, I mean, you probably in way over your head. And the service that they provide is just unbelievable, it's just ridiculous value. So I wanted to add that.
It's a good plug, man. Very well said. Totally agree. Even with experienced folks, and Rob was on our last deal with us, he was really impressed with, again, not just the number of people, but the quality of execution. It just can't be understated. If you don't have that, you can get a deal done, you can get it across the finish line. It's going to be a challenge with execution, right? And that's, at the end of the day, that's what your investors, we're fiduciaries of our investors' money. And so if you have millions of dollars at stake and you did not do enough diligence early on, it's going to be a struggle to hit those metrics. And, a one bad deal could be the end of your business, is the way we see it, right? Is if you fall short, good luck getting money for the next deal. And so it's important to do all the planning up front, partner with the right people, and go from there. So I love this piece because sometimes it's like, oh, I'm done underwriting. I have the deal. It's under contract. We're good to go. Numbers change, right? They absolutely will change. You're going to find things that you didn't quite know. You either underestimate, hopefully it's underestimated, or you overestimated and your expenses go down. It's hardly ever the case, but it's good if it does. So adjust, right? Continuously have, whether there's different versions of your Excel file, whatever it is, have a different column and adjust those numbers and make sure it still works, right? Michael and I and our other partners, we're always bouncing off each other and going, hey, this just came in. It's another quote. It just jumped up 50,000, whatever the number is. Are we okay? Right. And again, we have a buffer, right? Plus or minus a certain range. It's not so tight where we're like, oh man, one little thing will put us over, but you got to think about those, that on a everyday basis to make sure the numbers still work. And how does that change the business plan? Does it change the business plan, right? I'll show you guys a couple of pictures of I think a positive surprise, but it also adds CapEx to our deal, and that's the dungeon. I'll show you guys a picture. Some of you know kind of what I'm getting into, but any questions on this part thus far? Because that's really the talking part. The rest of it's, I think, cool pictures. Dallin, you got anything? All right, awesome. So post visit, follow back up. pretty easy. Follow up, follow up. Same thing. One of the things that is not always thought about is we're like, for example, on this deal, we're expecting to close by the end of April. We have 8 lease expirations in the month of April. So the property is not under our ownership. It's still under the current seller. And so whatever happens in those 8 leases dictates the next 12 months. And so we were pretty transparent with the broker, who in this case is also the PM, but and they were very willing to work with us. And so we have a call later this week with Andrea and April and their PM team to go, hey, here's the leases, here's what we'd like to do. And so we get to provide our input to say, again, this particular property, they really haven't raised rents. And so they were likely going to keep the rents at the same place. Well, if they do that, that hurts our business plan, right? Because we're planning on getting rent bumps for those 8 units. And so it'll be a discussion to see, you know, what can we do with each individual scenario. But that's something you got to look at just in that window, because you could get locked out of 8 units for a whole year. And again, that could really hurt your rent growth expectations. And setting up operating accounts, like we're in the middle of that right now, opening up bank accounts just to make sure once the entities are set up, you're going to need an operating account to have your funds, your reserves loaded into. So when the property manager takes over, it's not like you have a full months of rental income in there. You got to have something to operate with. So put a couple months of expenses in there so that you can run the business and start doing some of those repairs and things that are going to be required. And then other things that happen really in tandem. I mentioned the loan process. We're right in the middle of that right now. We'll have some further details, but we feel like we're pretty good with that. The lender's going to ask for surveys, so we're going to start doing our third-party surveys. And then the legal SEC side, if you're raising capital, is the formations and start to go raise money, right, to make sure you can close on the deal. So all those things really have to happen at the same time. But this is the focus is just DD on this side. So this was our awesome find, and this is not like a Fight Club cage. Kind of looks like one though. So so the property has 3 buildings. In the middle building, there's a laundry room, which you guys can see on to the right, and there's this doorway that you can see right there. That doorway leads to this opening. These 2 kind of funky pictures, and so it's hard to see the scale, but this is 100 feet long, and it's about 30 feet wide. And we were like, what in the world was going on? So the previous owner set up these chicken coops, I call them, and they allowed tenants to store their stuff in them. And so there's a gold mine of, like, I don't know, old books and things that you could find in there, but really hasn't been used. And I think when there was repair guys on site, they were hanging out and doing stuff in the room, but it's a lot of opportunity. And so what we're thinking about doing, so we didn't know anything about this, right? We're like, what can we do? This is kind of our general vision, and hopefully you guys can kind of see this, but that laundry room entrance is right up here. We think we want to turn the space around and put a laundry room on one side, have a kind of a lounge space, and then put a fitness center on the back end, a kind of supply room for the repair guys, and have that other exit. So this is about 100 feet. You can kind of see some renderings that I just was playing around with today. We'll have to see how much this costs. It wasn't in our original budget, but we think that if we do something like this, there's some definite value add to the tenants, and they'll be okay with spending a little bit more on rent if they have a space like this. So while they wait, they can do laundry. Currently, the property is producing $0 in laundry, so we think that's a huge opportunity. We can't put them in the units; it's not quite perfect for that. But we think if we can make a good space that's safe, clean, lit, that they'll utilize it. Some exterior pictures. Again, I mentioned the asphalt parking lot. Roofs are in good shape. Beautiful views. There's some again, more asphalt damage. But all things that are, again, not the end of the world, but some pictures from the inside. We were surprised to see some new flooring in more than a few of the units. So there's some vinyl plank flooring. That's probably the way we'll go. Almost every first floor had ceramic tile, and new water heaters in probably about a third. Some older furnaces, but again, nothing that was to the point where we're like, oh no, this is a hot mess. This is another fun project. So there used to be a pool here, as you can see there. filled up with a bunch of sand. So it could be a big sandbox, or what we're thinking about is to just kind of cover up this space and put a couple of pergolas, barbecue area, maybe some turf, some pavers to just cover this area to really brighten it up. And there's no space to really hang out. The reason they decided to get rid of the pool was this back is open. And so there was kind of random people coming in and using the pool. And so, and there's a lot of maintenance in New Mexico as far as regulations to have pools open. So many of the smaller facilities are just like, unless we have somebody on site, we're not even going to try to manage the pool. So they filled it up. So we're going to, like I said, make a little outdoor space. Again, that'll give us a little bit of extra amenity. We can justify a slight rent increase.
Mike, there's a question from Mark. Do you plan to use a third-party company for the laundry service, for the laundromats?
Great question. So CSC is like the national kind of laundry third-party company. That's who is there now. They're not doing anything for us. That's really special. I need to explore it. I've asked CalCap and a few other folks which way it works. A lot of owners are just buying the units, buying a little bit nicer units, and then having the repair guys maintain them. And really the first couple of years, not a lot of maintenance other than cleaning out the vents. I think we're going to lean towards owning our own and keeping all of the revenue. If you do have a contract, it sometimes goes, and Amy or Andrea, correct me, is it like 60-40, right? Like 60% goes to the CSC company.
Yeah, so typically, depending on the length of the contract, some people do like a 5-year or a 10-year. 10-year is more standard with CSC. Then 10-year is typically like a 50-50 split, and then 60-40 is kind of the other option. They used to give these great incentives where if we were willing to sign a 5-year contract, we could do a big, huge cash payment at the beginning as an incentive to buy on with them. But since COVID, they have dismantled about 2/3 of their staff and shut quite a bit of their operations down immediately come March, April. They did this from jump. So they're not doing any incentive programs anymore. We have them running both ways on complexes that either CalCap owns and manages, or also what fee managers have, where it's kind of mixed on purchasing in New Mexico. It's a little harder to find a company to buy from. So as we look into this, what we're looking at is getting something in Arizona if we chose to buy it, finding a good wholesale option in Arizona, taking it out there, and then finding somebody that can work on them, making sure we have all of that lined up without having to renew a contract.
Awesome. That's good. Great question. Great question. At the end of the day, we look at it as what's additional income we can make. And if we split it, if they offer a decent incentive, if we split it, we don't have any burden or liability. We still get some of the income. If we buy new units and we manage it ourselves, a little more labor up front, but it's 100% of the revenue. So we're going to do a little bit of a poll we're going to survey our tenant base. And before we just go out and do it, I think we want to get a good idea of would there be usage, and we'll kind of base it on that. And same thing with that whole space is if we do the laundry room, we might end up doing it in phases where it's, possibly laundry room first, and maybe we don't do the lounge, not this. We definitely want to get rid of this. We might even do storage. That's the other idea. Amy had that idea of like possibly putting in some, whether it's an Amazon locker or something like that. With technology and everything going, most folks still working from home, having stuff delivered is an important piece. And so, anyone that lives in an apartment, it's a little more challenging to receive packages. So there isn't a leasing office in this space. So that was the other intent, is to create a leasing space, not for packages necessarily, but for folks that come in and want to tour the property, or have challenges. But go ahead.
So definitely not an underground fight club, right? That's not happening.
Well, there is a flex space, Kunal, possibly, that we could maybe do a fight club in this location. But, the first rule is you don't talk about it, dude. All right, let's see here. So I think that's it. Oh, let me go back. As if we didn't talk about CalCap enough, here's some more information. They are awesome. They have a very good footprint in the Southwest, and they really, the thing that we aligned with was core values. Their people are phenomenal. I bug the crap out of them all the time, and they're always smiling and handling stuff. So So I'll say thank you so much. But if any of you are getting ready to buy a property and it's 50 units and up, right? It's kind of the baseline.
Yes, sorry.
No,
I
no
was
worries.
busy texting Todd, sorry.
That's all good. That's all. Do what you got to do. So yeah, 50 units and up.
Yes.
But again, they're in New Mexico, Texas, and in Arizona, of course.
Yeah, reach out, even if it's not 50. I've got some good referral information for other companies, and I don't have a problem talking through needs. So give me a shout, and actually I'll put my information in here in the chat if that'll probably help.
Awesome. Perfect. That's we actually got through that pretty quick. Questions, comments, complaints, anything. Feedback is a gift.
Great presentation, I'll say.
Well,
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I'm actually a real estate agent for Keller Williams.
Hey, Robert.
And I've got some guys that have a bunch of smaller buildings in Scottsdale, and they're thinking about their biggest problem is property management. They don't live in the state. I had made the suggestion, instead of keeping the 3 separate buildings they had, consolidate that along with some money that's coming in that's got to go through a 1031 exchange and buy one property. They've asked for some recommendations on property management companies, and the ones that I came across are also brokers. And I'm not real comfortable with this because the total deal is probably about 30 million bucks. I know I could probably, I'm from New Jersey. I owned a firm for 30 years outside of New York City, and I dealt with smaller multifamilies. And the money wasn't quite as big as a deal is going to be like this, but I'm not entirely sure how to secure and what the property management companies do here. There, it wasn't an issue because they wouldn't list the properties. In New Jersey, they didn't have to be licensed as a realtor to be a property management. So that's a big difference between them and Arizona. Pretty much everybody's a broker is going to be a property manager.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good problem to have. Just need to figure out, number one, what kind of property do you want to buy, or do they want to buy, right? I assume they want to stay in Phoenix and buy something larger, like
they know. They know exactly what they want, where they want it. They're very, very precise. That's not the problem, because these guys are experienced, walking them through the deals. And the problem, my only concern is if I send them to a property management company, I don't want them taking my $30 million deal.
Yeah, well, that won't happen with us. That's for sure. We are strictly property management. Yeah. So that is safe with us. And I do run into that with the smaller deals where you have some of that, but a lot of the bigger deals you don't. So yeah, reach out to me. My info's in the chat and we can talk through it. But yeah, you won't see us doing that. So
okay, are you Amy?
I am.
Okay, so I'll give you a call tomorrow, Amy.
Perfect.
Yep, they'll take care of you, and I think that's the right size of property that they manage. Will fit in their wheelhouse perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Thanks for asking the question, Robert. Appreciate it. Michael Wagman, Michael Harwood, Sean, any questions? Some of you guys never turned your cameras on, so we don't even know what you look like. Let's see here. Mark is driving, so I won't give him a hard time. That's okay. Hey, Nick. I know what Omar looks like. Let's see.
Hey, Mike, real quick, something that I noticed before you even stated the year of that property, I was like, that's probably an 82 or 83 build. Yeah. Literally looking at the photos of your deal. I kid you not, same exact finishes in our property that was built in 82. And this one is in Arizona. We were just down at it yesterday. So that brings up a good point. The reason I bring that up is because once you get familiar with years and types of properties, New Mexico and Arizona, construction is very similar. So you could typically go in and without seeing every single unit, have an idea of what's inside the walls, what types of finishes are going to be there. And I'm fortunate enough, one of my business partners is a general contractor, and we had the experience. We looked at a property in Phoenix, and we drove separate. I was going to meet him there. He got there about 5 minutes before me. And as I pull up, he's already pulling out and he's shaking his head. He's like, nope, not worth it. Let's go on. And come to find out, one of our colleagues out of state submitted an LOI, got the offer accepted, and they toured the property. And I actually think CalCap was involved on that one as well. So they went out there, did the whole due diligence, all that, and they decided to back out. So it's good to have somebody on your team, a contractor or a property manager. What took us 5 minutes, unfortunately, took them a day of work and really digging in. So it's just really important to have those people on your team. And the property managers, I think Amy was saying, people are reaching out almost when it's too late. You need to get those people, start those conversations sooner than later.
Yeah, well said. Well, imagine if you bought the property, right? Then you'd be potentially in some hot water. And, age, to your point, right? 60s properties, they have chillers. Not a bad thing, just one of those things you got to be aware of. There's some electrical panels that were older that have issues. So you might have a property. It shouldn't discourage you from buying it. You should just be aware. Some of the late 90s had some PEX issues, right? With a certain brand that's no longer in business. And so they had some in-wall issues. Just things in certain markets, there was more of it or not, but having familiarity with it is a huge part. And yeah, well said.
Now, out of curiosity, did you guys look into the plumbing in this one?
It's funny you asked that. So it's all copper. The challenge was scoping drains. Is this property sits up on a hill and there's not a single clean out across the whole thing. So we just green lighted today. We still have another week on DD. So we're going to actually go to the bottom units on the farthest end of the buildings and take the toilets out and scope the line through the toilets in a unit. So once we take over the property, we'll probably put some clean outs in, but for right now, to make sure the main line's in good shape, we're going to go that route. So a little more aggressive. It's going to cost us money, but might cost us a couple grand versus 30,000 if we find a cracked main line, right? So,
but at least it's copper. It doesn't sound like you have any polybutylene in there.
Yeah, no poly.
Do you have any issue with aluminum wiring in properties from the 60s out here?
In Albuquerque, I know. I don't know about Phoenix. Yeah, there was some aluminum wiring and some of the panels were Zinsco.
Federated panels, right?
Federated was the other one. Yeah, Federated. I thought Zinsco was the other one. But
yeah. The university.
I have a property in Phoenix that. I have a property in Phoenix that is built in the mid 60s. And during due diligence on the transition of that one, there was no aluminum wiring because, of course, that's initially what they look for. So I think I've seen 3 or 4 transitions during due diligences, and I've yet to see it come up in Arizona.
Hey, this is
Mike. We have a question or a comment. I'm not sure. Mark, he made a comment. Secure written agreements in advance. Mark, you want to unmute yourself and probably if it's a comment or it's a question?
Yeah, that was when he was asking earlier. I put down when he was asking about, being concerned about the realtors and property managers and all that. I think you can get written agreements as to who's representing who in advance of making contact. He should be able to protect himself.
So this was for Robert, right?
It's for the Remax.
Yep, for Robert.
Or I'm sorry, Keller Williams agent.
Mark, you also a real estate agent, right, Mark?
Yeah, I'm a broker in California.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
With Keller Williams doesn't say no.
Was there?
Guys, can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Good evening, everybody. I've been a broker here in Phoenix for a long time, and I haven't come across aluminum in a while, but the solution is pigtails. So if electricians will know what that is.
Yeah.
So, but Yeah, I probably haven't had to deal with that in at least a decade.
A lot of it was replaced over the years.
Correct.
Good point.
Yeah,
Awesome.
gentlemen, if I could jump in, from the perspective of insurance, a lot of carriers are requiring upgrades to the Zinco and the Fedco paneling and the electricity. So remediation has become a big topic versus a remediation with respect to replacement and not doing the pigtails. Or I believe the Copeland method, or there's another one out there. I don't remember.
Omar, are you saying that remediation or replacement is mandated by insurance prior to close of escrow if this is discovered?
So it can be, depending on the age of the location and property. They may stipulate for the remediation or the replacement as a contingency or subject to in the contract.
Gotcha.
And the difference between pigtails and replacement will be a huge cost.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I was gonna say I don't know enough about it to speak educated, but Omar, from your perspective, Omar's with Garzelli Group, by the way, so he provides insurance on property. So if you need insurance, check with Omar. But he's pretty well versed in this side. Are you seeing it as more of a coverage issue from not just insurance but also lender requirements? Does that ever come up, or is it kind of two different things?
I would say it's two different things. And you're seeing it more on the side of the carrier. Yeah, from the carriers. Mind you, if you have good relationships with the underwriting team, all carriers are understanding, and they can work with you on putting a improvement plan. And it can be agreed upon because the expense can get so astronomical when it comes to replacement of the electrical that, depending if it's 150 units, I've had carriers just ask for 30 units in the first year, possible 40 or 50 in the second year, and they work with you. So don't let it be a deal breaker. Just ensure to communicate that with your broker.
Omar, let me ask you a question. So I'm going to use this property as an example right now. Mike here is working with CalCap, and they're doing everything from lease audits to physical inspections and plumbing and HVAC and whatnot, right? But he has received a quote from you. I'm just making it up. He has received a quote from you for insurance services. At what point, let's say they discovered, I don't know, in this property, aluminum wiring, right? How would you find out, and when will you find out about this? Can you guys hear me?
So
Yep.
Depending on the carrier, yes, sorry, I was just giving it a moment. Depending on the carrier, you're going to have a inspection on the property. A carrier will send their own individual out. So it possibly may be discovered at the inspection point. And then the carrier will send out a recommendation or a must fix.
Gotcha. So assuming, like, say for this property,
Now,
Mike has I'm sorry, he has a, let's say 45 DD period, 45-day DD period. So I'm assuming that the carrier will come in within those 45 days, correct?
No, they will come in 30 days or within 30 days after you close.
I see.
Yeah, because prior to they have no responsibility.
I see.
Unless it is discovered and shared with your broker, where then I have the responsibility to share that with the carrier. And then we begin the process of, what type of program or plan will, the buying entity have in place to remedy the electrical or whatever the safety issue may be. Ballasters, spaced out too much, and we can go down the list of what may be requested of you.
I see. The intent of my question was, at what point will, let's say in this property, Mike include that cost in his underwriting?
It would, I'll speak to that, because ideally during our DD, when we had an electrical inspection on this and everything checked out fine, we should have identified it at that point. I could be wrong. I would think that the inspector on behalf of the carrier would likely find similar findings to our electrician, right? If they find something totally different, that's an issue, I guess. But if we were thorough on our end with our contractors, we should have identified those things, and then it would be our job to communicate that to those that need to know, and we'll make the adjustment from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, good question, though. What else? Michael, Ryan, you got anything? Nick, any questions, comments? Cool. All right. Well, we are, look at that, right on time. Perfect. I would like to thank everybody for, I love this last part, by the way. It's a great dialogue because we have experts and experience in the group, and the goal is for you not to listen to me. I have the least experience in the room, so I want everyone to contribute, and feel free to share what you know. The group hopefully will benefit from everyone chiming in and sharing those experiences and knowledge. So thank you for that. Our next event will be April 7th, which is crazy to say. It's the first Wednesday of every month. So April 7th, we'll work on the topic. Thank you again for chiming in. There is a recording of this, so if you were picking your nose again during the call, I got you recorded, and I will send that out to everybody. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Mike.